It has long been a source of some small private regret to me that, in the course of compiling these narratives of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I have been forced by considerations of space and occasionally of discretion to omit a great number of cases which were in themselves of the highest interest. Some were of too delicate a nature to be laid before the public, touching as they did upon the honour of a royal house or the stability of a great financial institution. Others were of such a singular and intricate character that their true solution was never fully established, even by my friend's remarkable powers. Yet among these unrecorded adventures, there are those which linger in my memory with a peculiar vividness, not merely for the intellectual puzzle they presented, but for the glimpse they afforded into the dark and turbulent undercurrents that flow beneath the placid surface of society. Such a case was that of the Count von Unzu-Grafenstein, a matter which Holmes himself once referenced in passing as a demonstration of the far-reaching and often invisible nature of his work. The affair was of such gravity, involving not only the life of a high-born nobleman, but also the delicate balance of power between two great European nations, that for many years I felt it my duty to keep my notes upon the subject under lock and key. Now, however, with the principal actors long past from the stage of history and the political tensions of that era relegated to the pages of textbooks, I feel that no harm can come from a full and frank account of the events. The affair commenced upon a raw and foggy evening in the late autumn of '95. A damp, spectral mist had crept up from the river and now swirled in dense, choking wreaths through the gaslit streets of London. It penetrated even into our snug sitting room at 221B Baker Street, muffling the ceaseless rumble of the traffic and blurring the familiar outlines of the furniture. I had laid aside my paper, finding the print to swim in the uncertain light, and sat watching my companion, who was curled up in his armchair in one of those curious moods of intense, introspective stillness, which were as much a part of his singular character as his moments of feverish energy. His long, thin fingers were steepled before him, his hawk-like features were cast in shadow, and only the occasional glimmer in his deep-set eyes told me that his mind was far from idle. For my own part, I found the oppressive silence and the phantom-like shapes of the fog outside my window to be working upon my nerves, and I was about to suggest a cheerful tune upon the violin when the sudden, sharp peal of our doorbell cut through the quiet of the house. "Ah, Watson," said Holmes, without altering his position in the slightest. "I rather fancy that will be a client. The weather is precisely of the sort that encourages men to seek counsel. When the world outside is formless and threatening, the mind turns inward to the anxieties that fester there. A man may walk about with a troubled heart on a fine summer's day and feel himself a part of the bustling world, but on a night like this his personal fears become one with the encroaching darkness. I should not be surprised if this is a matter of some gravity." He had scarcely finished speaking when Mrs. Hudson showed in a gentleman of a most distinguished and imposing appearance. He was a man well past middle age, tall and erect, with a military bearing that even his visible agitation could not entirely conceal. His hair was iron grey and cropped close to his skull, and a magnificent moustache of the same hue bristled over a firm, thin-lipped mouth. He was dressed in the height of fashion, with a fur-collared coat, which he now unbuttoned to reveal the evening dress of a man of society. Yet his face was pale, and his hand, as he held a vellum visiting card out to Holmes, trembled almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he inquired, his voice a deep, guttural baritone, resonant with the unmistakable accent of the Teutonic races. My friend bowed and waved him towards the armchair opposite. "I am he, sir. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, in whom you may confide as you would in myself. Pray be seated, for you seem somewhat distressed." "I am, Mr. Holmes. I am distressed to a degree I have seldom known in a life that has not been devoid of peril." He handed the card to Holmes, who glanced at it and passed it to me. In elegant copperplate script were engraved the words, "Count von und zu Grafenstein, Chamberlain to His Imperial Majesty, the German Emperor." "A count," murmured Holmes, his eyes lighting with interest. "And a Chamberlain. You are far from home, sir." "I am in London on a matter of diplomacy," replied the Count, choosing his words with care. "A matter of some delicacy which need not concern us directly. What does concern us, Mr. Holmes, is that I have reason to believe my life is in imminent danger." "Indeed. And what has led you to this conclusion?" The Count drew a hand across his brow, upon which a fine dew of perspiration had gathered. "For the past 3 days I have been the recipient of certain communications. They are not threatening in the common sense of the word. There are no vulgar demands for money, no crude drawings of daggers or skulls. They are more insidious, more unnerving than that." He reached into the breast pocket of his coat and produced a small square envelope of the finest quality paper. He laid it upon the table between us. Holmes picked it up with the tips of his fingers, his expression one of intense concentration. He examined the paper, the seal, even the scent, holding it for a moment to his long, sensitive nose. "There is no postmark," he observed. "Delivered by hand, then, and the wax is of a common red variety, obtainable anywhere. The paper, however, is of a type manufactured in Bohemia. An interesting detail. And what of the contents?" The Count gestured for him to open it. Holmes did so, using a small penknife from his pocket, and unfolded a single sheet of paper. Upon it was written a solitary line in a curious, cramped and backward-sloping hand. "The old order passes. The new dawn is at hand." And beneath it, not a signature, but a small, crude drawing of a 5-pointed star, inked in black. "This," said the Count, "was pushed under the door of my suite at the Carlton Hotel 2 nights ago. Yesterday another arrived." He produced a second envelope, identical to the first. The message within was equally cryptic. "The chains of tyranny are forged by the hands of aristocrats." Again the symbol of the black star was appended. "And this evening," the Count continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "scarcely an hour ago I found this pinned to the velvet curtain of my opera box at Covent Garden." The third message was the most chilling of all. "A star will fall from the heavens when it is darkest." "This is all?" asked Holmes, laying the 3 sheets of paper side by side upon the table. "It is not, Mr. Holmes. I have been followed. For 2 days, wherever I go, I have been aware of a shadow at my heels. A man of medium height, with a dark, thick beard, and a most peculiar, dragging limp in his left leg. I have seen him in the lobby of my hotel, across the street in the park, and even lurking in the shadows of the Opera House tonight. It was the sight of him, combined with this latest note, that compelled me to seek your assistance without delay. I made inquiries, and your name was mentioned to me as a man of unparalleled discretion and ability." Holmes leaned back in his chair, the tips of his fingers once more pressed together. The languor had vanished from his demeanour, replaced by an electric tension that I knew of old. His eyes shone with the fierce, cold light of a mind that has been presented with a worthy problem. "The matter is certainly of interest," he said in his quiet, precise tones. "A German nobleman on a secret diplomatic mission in London is threatened by an anonymous correspondent who uses Bohemian paper and the symbol of a black star. The threats are philosophical rather than personal, yet they are delivered in a manner calculated to inspire the maximum amount of terror. You were right to come to me, Count. This is no common blackmailer or lunatic. We are dealing with an adversary of a very different caliber." "You believe so?" "I am certain of it. The combination of high-flown rhetoric and a sinister, recurring symbol is the hallmark of the political secret society. The Black Star, in particular, is significant. It has been associated, if my memory serves me, with a number of the more extreme anarchist and nihilistic factions that have plagued Eastern and Central Europe for the past decade. These are not men who threaten for sport, Count. They are fanatics, driven by a burning hatred for the established order of things. If they have marked you, it is because you, in your person, represent everything they seek to destroy." The Count's pale face grew a shade paler. "Nihilists," he breathed. "Here in London?" "London, my dear sir, is the great cesspool into which all the loungers and idlers of the Empire are irresistibly drained," said Holmes, quoting his own past observation. "And, I might add, of the continent as well. It offers a refuge to political extremists of every stripe. They find in its vastness and its anonymity the perfect soil in which to cultivate their poisonous creeds. Tell me, Count, you mentioned your diplomatic mission. Without prying into the secrets of state, can you tell me its general nature? The enemies one makes are often a direct consequence of the friends one keeps." The Count hesitated, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. "It is a delicate matter. It concerns the strengthening of ties between my country and yours. There are elements, both here and abroad, who would not wish to see such an alliance prosper." "And these elements might have reason to wish you ill?" "They might indeed. A scandal, an unfortunate incident involving a man in my position could undo months of careful negotiation. It could sow discord and mistrust where we seek to build harmony." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "Mr. Holmes, you must understand. My own life is of little consequence in the grand scheme of things, but the success of my mission is of vital importance. I am not a coward, but I cannot afford to be removed from the board, so to speak, at this critical juncture. It was with this in mind that I thought it prudent to mention I am a distant relation, through my mother's side, of the royal house of Bohemia." A flicker of a smile played upon Holmes's lips. He glanced at me, and I saw a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "I am aware of the connection," he said smoothly. "Indeed, I had the privilege of being of some small service to that family in the matter of the papers of a certain Irene Adler." The Count stared at him, his mouth agape. "You are that Sherlock Holmes? The man who—" "Precisely," said Holmes, cutting him off with a wave of his hand. "Let us say that I have a certain familiarity with the complications that can attend persons of high birth. It is a world of its own, with its own predators, and it is my business to know them. Now you will return to your hotel, Count. Act as if nothing is amiss. You will, however, confine yourself to your suite for the evening. I must have time to think. Tomorrow we shall act. Watson, the Commissionnaire's bell, if you please. We have need of the Baker Street division of the detective police force." As I moved to do his bidding, I knew that the game was afoot. A German count, a secret treaty, and a shadowy cabal of nihilists. The fog-bound streets of London had presented my friend with a problem worthy of his powers, and I felt a thrill of anticipation at the thought of what the morrow might bring. The sign of the Black Star. The departure of our noble client left a palpable air of tension in our Baker Street rooms. Holmes, however, seemed to thrive upon it. The lethargy that had held him in its grip for the better part of the day was now entirely dispelled, and he paced back and forth across the hearth-rug like a caged panther, his head sunk upon his chest, his hands clasped behind his back. The familiar signs of intense mental activity were all present: the furrowed brow, the tightly compressed lips, the distant, inward-looking gaze that saw far beyond the confines of our humble apartment. "The threads of this affair are as fine as a spider's web, Watson," he remarked, pausing in his perambulations to stare into the glowing heart of the fire. "And yet I fancy they will lead us to a very formidable creature at their centre. Did you observe the Count's demeanour?" "He seemed thoroughly frightened," I replied. "And with good reason, I should think." "Frightened, yes, but there was more to it than that. There was a certain rigidity, a reluctance to speak plainly, even when his own life is at stake. A matter of diplomacy, he calls it, a convenient phrase to conceal a multitude of sins. He is a key player in a game of immense importance, and he knows it. The Nihilists know it too. This is not a random attack upon a symbol of aristocracy. It is a calculated blow aimed at the very heart of European politics." He resumed his restless pacing. "Let us reconstruct. A secret society, almost certainly of Russian or Polish origin, has established a branch here in London. They have learned of the Count's mission and his identity. They have marked him for death. Their methods, however, are peculiar. These notes are not designed merely to threaten, but to unnerve. They are a form of psychological warfare, intended to break their victim's spirit before they strike the final blow. The man with the limp is a crude piece of stagecraft, a visible manifestation of the unseen threat designed to keep the Count in a constant state of anxiety. But who is he, Holmes? And who is the author of these notes? The man with the limp is likely a subordinate, a common foot soldier of the organization. As for the author, the backward-sloping hand is suggestive. It is often found in those who have been taught to write in a Cyrillic script and have later adapted to the Latin alphabet. The use of Bohemian paper is a clever false trail, a deliberate misdirection intended to point us towards Prague and away from St. Petersburg. But it is the Black Star that is our most promising clue. It is the signature of a fanatic, a man who has submerged his own identity into that of his cause. We are not hunting a mere criminal, Watson. We are hunting an ideologue. At that moment, the shuffling feet of the Baker Street irregulars were heard upon the stair, and their youthful leader, Wiggins, was ushered in by Mrs. Hudson. He was a sharp-faced lad, with the alert, knowing eyes of one who has been raised on the city streets. "You sent for us, Mr. Olmes?" he asked, knuckling his forehead. "I did, Wiggins. I have a task for you and your pack. I want every anarchist club, every socialist hall, every dingy cafe from Soho to Whitechapel, where political refugees are known to congregate, to be placed under observation. I am looking for a man of medium height, with a dark bushy beard, who walks with a pronounced limp in his left leg. He is to be followed, not accosted. I wish to know where he goes, who he meets, and most importantly, where he resides. There are 5 guineas for the man who brings me that address." Wiggins' eyes gleamed at the mention of the sum. "We'll find him for you, Mr. Holmes. If he's in London, we'll find him." With a final nod, the boy was gone, his bare feet making scarcely a sound as he descended the 17 steps to the street below. "And now, Watson," said Holmes, turning to his chemical corner, which was cluttered with retorts, test tubes and Bunsen burners, "we must prepare for our own part in the investigation. I propose a visit to the Carlton Hotel in the morning, but not as ourselves. A direct inquiry would put our quarry on their guard. We must be more subtle." The following morning saw us attired in a fashion that would have caused considerable astonishment to our friends at the club. Holmes was transformed into a portly-gaitered, nonconformist clergyman with a broad-brimmed hat and a benevolent, if somewhat vacant, expression. My own role was that of a humble country doctor, a part which, I confess, I found a trifle galling. Thus disguised, we presented ourselves at the Carlton and inquired for the manager. "We are here," announced Holmes in a booming, unctuous voice, "on behalf of the League for the Moral Improvement of the Metropolis. We have reason to believe that a certain foreign personage of dissolute habits is currently resident in your establishment. It is our duty to—" The manager, a sleek and harassed-looking Swiss gentleman, threw up his hands in despair. "Gentlemen, please, this is a respectable hotel. We have many foreign personages of the highest standing. The Duc de Montrachet, the Prince of Saxe-Meiningen, the Count von und zu Grafenstein." "Ah, the Count," boomed Holmes, producing the small notebook. "That is the very name. A known gambler and libertine, I am told." "On the contrary, sir," the manager protested hotly. "The Count is a model of propriety. He is a quiet, scholarly gentleman. He keeps to his suite, receives few visitors, and retires early. I can assure you, you are gravely misinformed." "His suite, you say? It is on which floor?" "The third, Suite 3B. But I cannot permit you to disturb him." "We have no wish to disturb him, my good man," said Holmes, patting the manager's arm with an air of condescending goodwill. "We merely seek to observe. We shall position ourselves in the corridor and await our moment. The forces of righteousness are patient." Under the guise of this absurd pretext, we were able to establish ourselves in a small alcove at the end of the third-floor corridor, from which we had a clear, if distant, view of the door to the Count's suite. For 2 hours we waited. An eternity of watching chambermaids and hotel guests pass to and fro. I was beginning to lose all patience with the charade when Holmes suddenly stiffened, his fingers closing upon my arm in a warning grip. "Look, Watson," he breathed. "The lift." The ornate iron cage of the hotel lift had come to a halt at our floor, and from it emerged a man who corresponded exactly to the Count's description. He was of medium height, his face was obscured by a thick dark beard, and he dragged his left leg as he walked, the sole of his boot scraping faintly against the polished floor. He did not so much as glance in our direction, but proceeded directly to the Count's door. He did not knock, but stooped and slid a white envelope beneath it before turning and limping back towards the lift. "Quickly, Watson," Holmes whispered. "We must not lose him." We hurried down the corridor in his wake, keeping a safe distance. We followed him down in the lift and out into the bustling street. Our quarry seemed oblivious to our pursuit, shambling along with his head down, a solitary and rather pathetic figure. He led us on a long and winding chase, through the elegant squares of Mayfair, down the crowded thoroughfare of Piccadilly, and into the labyrinthine streets of Soho. Here the character of the city changed dramatically. The stately homes and expensive shops gave way to a warren of narrow alleys, foreign-looking restaurants, and dingy tenement buildings. Finally, the man turned into a squalid cul-de-sac and disappeared through the doorway of a grimy four-story lodging house. A faded sign above the door announced it as the International Hotel, a name that was grotesquely at odds with its dilapidated appearance. Holmes drew me back into the shadows of a neighbouring archway. "So, this is the nest," he murmured, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "The International Hotel, a fitting name for a den of conspirators. Our friend Wiggins and his pack will have no trouble keeping watch here. For now, our work is done. Let us return to Baker Street and see what new missive our sinister correspondent has composed for his victim." An hour later, we were once more in our rooms, having dispatched a cab to the Carlton to retrieve the note from the Count. He had, by a prearranged signal, left it for us at the front desk. Holmes spread the single sheet of paper upon the table. The message was stark and to the point. "The mighty are destined for the dust. Your destiny approaches." And beneath it the familiar ominous symbol of the Black Star. "They are closing in, Watson," Holmes said, his voice grim. "The philosophical pronouncements are becoming more personal, more direct. The time for psychological pressure is drawing to a close. The time for action is near. And somewhere in that foul rookery in Soho, a man is plotting the death of a nobleman and the disruption of a continent's peace. A man who, I suspect, is far more intelligent and far more dangerous than the shambling messenger we followed today. We have found the web, Watson. Now we must find the spider." He fell silent, his gaze fixed upon the sinister Black Star. I saw in his face a look of grim determination, the look of a hunter who has picked up the trail of a worthy and dangerous prey. The game had taken a darker turn, and I knew that before it was played out, we might well find ourselves face to face with the unseen hand that guided this deadly conspiracy. A brother's counsel. The discovery of the Nihilist's lair in Soho marked a significant advance in our investigation, yet it also presented us with a fresh set of problems. To move openly against them would be to risk scattering the conspirators and allowing the ringleader to escape our grasp. On the other hand, to delay might be to place the Count's life in mortal jeopardy. Holmes spent the entire evening in a state of profound meditation, enveloped in a dense cloud of smoke from his strongest shag tobacco, the silence broken only by the occasional scraping of a match or a long-drawn sigh. "The problem, Watson, is one of timing," he said at last, emerging from his tobacco-induced trance. "We have the foot soldier, the man with the limp, but we have not yet had a glimpse of the general. To arrest the former would be a tactical blunder of the first order. It would be like trimming the leaves of a poisonous plant while leaving the root intact. Our only course is to watch, to wait, and to hope that they will betray their hand." "But can we afford to wait, Holmes?" I asked anxiously. "These notes are growing more menacing with every passing day." "I have taken precautions," he replied. "I have had a word with our old friend Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard. The Count's suite is under discreet surveillance, and the International Hotel is being watched from a safe distance by a number of his best men. But these are mere physical barriers. The true danger lies in the cunning of our adversary's mind. A fanatic with a cause is 100 times more dangerous than a common cutthroat, for his motives are not personal gain, but the fulfillment of an abstract ideal, for which he is often prepared to sacrifice his own life as readily as that of his victim." He rose and went to the window, peering out into the swirling fog as if he might find some answer in its murky depths. "There is another element to this case, Watson, that troubles me. The political dimension. The Count was deliberately evasive, but it is clear that his mission is of the utmost gravity. A misstep on our part could have repercussions that extend far beyond the life of a single man. In such matters, there is only one man in England whose counsel is of any value." "Mycroft," I said, understanding at once. "Precisely. My brother holds a unique position in the British government. He is the keeper of all state secrets, the central exchange to which all wires of information converge. If anyone can shed light on the true nature of the Count's business in London, it is he. I shall send him a wire at once." He scribbled a short, cryptic message on a telegraph form and dispatched it with a commissionaire. The reply was not long in coming. A telegram arrived within the hour, its contents as terse and to the point as Mycroft himself. "Diogenes Club. Tomorrow at 4. Come alone." The following afternoon, Holmes set off for Pall Mall, leaving me to my medical journals and my own uneasy thoughts. He returned a little after 6 o'clock, his expression more grave than I had seen it since the start of the affair. He threw himself into his armchair and sat for a long time in silence, staring into the fire. "Well, Holmes," I ventured at last, "was your visit to the Diogenes Club productive?" "It was, Watson," he replied, his voice low and serious. "It was more productive and more disturbing than I could have imagined. Mycroft, as always, was in possession of all the facts. It seems our client, the Count von Unzu-Grafenstein, is not merely a diplomat. He is the secret plenipotentiary of the German Emperor himself." "Good heavens!" I exclaimed. "He is in London to conclude a secret naval treaty with our government, a treaty of non-aggression and mutual limitation of naval armaments. It is a pact of immense significance, designed to avert the very possibility of a future war between our two nations. There are powerful factions, both in Germany and here in Britain, who are vehemently opposed to it. The Junker militarists in Berlin and the more bellicose members of our own Admiralty would see it scuppered at any cost. And the Nihilists? That is the truly sinister part of the affair. According to Mycroft's intelligence, this particular group, who call themselves the Children of the Black Star, are not merely disgruntled Russian exiles. They are being secretly funded and directed by a third power, a nation that has a vested interest in seeing Britain and Germany remain at loggerheads, and perhaps one day come to blows. Russia, I guessed, or France. The old rivalries die hard. By assassinating the Count, they hope to achieve a double objective. Firstly, they will eliminate the principal architect of the treaty. Secondly, and more importantly, the murder of a high-ranking German official on British soil would create a diplomatic incident of the first magnitude. There would be accusations, recriminations, a cooling of relations. The treaty would be dead in the water, and the warmongers on both sides would have the field to themselves. It is a diabolically clever scheme, Watson. I was aghast at the scale of the conspiracy he was describing. But who is the leader of this group, Holmes? Does Mycroft know? A grim smile touched my friend's lips. He does. Mycroft's knowledge is encyclopedic. The man we are after is known to the secret police of 3 countries, though he has always managed to elude their grasp. His name is Klopman. Klopman. The name seemed to have a sinister ring to it. He is, by all accounts, a remarkable man. A former university professor of chemistry from Warsaw, he became embroiled in revolutionary politics and was forced to flee his homeland. He is a man of fierce intellect, a charismatic leader, and an utterly ruthless fanatic. He is a master of disguise and an expert in the formulation of obscure and untraceable poisons. He is the brain behind the Black Star, and he is here in London, directing this operation. The man with the limp is a mere pawn. Klopman is the king. The revelation cast a fresh and even more menacing light upon the whole affair. We were no longer dealing with a shadowy group of anarchists, but with a single, brilliant and malevolent mind. "So what is our next move?" I asked. "Mycroft has given me a free hand, with the full, if covert, support of the government. He has also provided me with a piece of information that may prove to be of vital importance. The final draft of the treaty is to be signed in 3 days' time at a secret location. However, on the evening before, the German ambassador is to host a grand reception at the embassy in honor of the Count. It is an occasion that will bring together the highest echelons of London society and the diplomatic corps. You believe they will make their attempt then? It is the perfect stage for a man of Klopman's theatrical sensibilities, said Holmes, his eyes gleaming. A public assassination of a major political figure. It would create the maximum possible shock and disruption. It is bold, it is audacious, and it is exactly the sort of stroke I would expect from him. He will not use a bomb or a gun. Such methods are too crude, too uncertain. He will use something subtle, something that befits his scientific background. Poison, I should imagine, and he will administer it himself. But how can he get close enough? The embassy will be heavily guarded. He is a master of disguise, Watson. He could be anyone. A waiter, a footman, even a fellow guest. That is the challenge that lies before us. In 3 days' time, we must enter the lion's den, surrounded by hundreds of people. And we must identify a man we have never seen. A man who can alter his appearance at will, before he commits an act that could plunge Europe into chaos. He rose and began to pace the room once more, not with the agitated energy of the previous night, but with the slow, deliberate tread of a general planning a great battle. "The odds are long, Watson," he said half to himself, "but the stakes could not be higher. We have been given a glimpse into the secret workshop of history, and we have been granted the power to intervene. It is a responsibility that would crush a lesser man. For my part, I find it invigorating." I could only watch him, my heart a strange mixture of apprehension and admiration. The stage was set for a final, deadly confrontation, and the fate of nations rested upon the wit and courage of my extraordinary friend. The web tightens. The 2 days that followed our interview with Mycroft were among the most anxious of my life. A sense of impending crisis hung over our Baker Street lodgings, as tangible as the autumn fog in the streets outside. Holmes was a whirlwind of activity, dispatching and receiving a constant stream of telegrams, spending hours closeted with unsavoury-looking informants who would slip in and out of the house like shadows, and poring over vast detailed maps of London. His Baker Street irregulars, under the command of the resourceful Wiggins, maintained a constant, unobtrusive watch upon the International Hotel in Soho. Their reports, delivered at all hours, painted a frustrating picture. The man with the limp, whose name they had discovered to be Petrov, was a regular fixture, but he seldom left the building. Other figures, mostly of a foreign and down-at-heel appearance, came and went, but there was no sign of a commanding personality, no one who could possibly be the formidable Klopman. He is directing them from a distance, Holmes concluded, stabbing at the map with the stem of his pipe. Or he is within that very building, so perfectly disguised that he is invisible even to the sharp eyes of my young street Arabs. He is a careful and patient general, Watson. He will not expose himself until the moment of the attack. On the afternoon before the embassy reception, a note arrived for us from the Count. It was delivered by a trusted legation messenger, and its contents threw a new and alarming light on the situation. My dear Mr. Holmes, I feel it is my duty to inform you of a most unsettling development. This morning I received a small parcel by post. It contained this. Taped to the bottom of the letter was a single withered black flower. It was of a species I did not recognize, with long, trumpet-shaped petals that were as dark and lustreless as funeral crepe. I do not know its meaning, the Count's letter continued, but I feel in my bones that it is a final warning. My nerve, I confess, is beginning to fail me. The reception tomorrow evening looms before me like a scaffold. I have half a mind to feign illness and remain in my hotel, but my duty forbids it. I place my life in your hands. I have ensured that both you and Dr. Watson receive invitations to the reception. I can only pray that your presence will be enough to avert the disaster I feel is imminent. Holmes examined the flower with the aid of a powerful magnifying glass, his expression one of the utmost gravity. This is no idle threat, Watson. This is the black lotus of the Upper Ussuri, a plant known to the native tribes of Siberia for its potent neurotoxic properties. It is not fatal in such a small quantity, but its message is unmistakable. It is a symbol of death delivered by a man who knows his toxicology. Klopman is telling the Count that he has the means and the knowledge to kill him. He's playing with him, like a cat with a mouse, right up to the very end. He laid the flower aside and fell into a deep and silent train of thought. "Tomorrow evening," he said at last, more to himself than to me. "It must be tomorrow evening, but how? A poisoned glass of wine? A dart from a blowpipe? A contaminated dish from the buffet? The possibilities are endless. We cannot watch everyone and everything. Then what are we to do, Holmes?" "We must force his hand," he declared, his eyes suddenly bright and hard. "We must alter the conditions of the experiment. We must introduce a new and unexpected variable that will compel our quarry to reveal himself." He strode to his desk and began to write with furious energy. He penned 3 separate notes, sealed them in envelopes, and handed them to me. "The first, Watson, is for Inspector Gregson. It contains my final instructions for the surveillance of the embassy. The second is for the Count. It will advise him on how to conduct himself at the reception. The third is for my brother, Mycroft. It is a request of a most unusual nature, and one which he alone can grant. You will deliver them yourself in a cab without delay. There is not a moment to be lost." I hurried to do his bidding, my mind in a whirl of speculation. What new scheme had his fertile brain devised? I delivered the notes as instructed and returned to Baker Street to find my friend in the process of a remarkable transformation. He had shed his familiar dressing gown and was now attired in the immaculate evening dress of a man of fashion. But it was his face that held my attention. By the subtle application of wax and powder, he had altered the shape of his nose and jaw, and a pair of gold-rimmed pince-nez gave him a distinctly academic and slightly short-sighted appearance. He looked for all the world like a visiting professor from a foreign university. "Holmes!" I exclaimed. "What is the meaning of this?" "If you wish to catch a fox, Watson, you must think like a fox," he replied, adjusting his cravat in the mirror. "Klopman is a master of disguise. It is only fitting that I should pay him the compliment of imitation. Tonight I shall not be Sherlock Holmes, the consulting detective. I shall be Dr. Sigerson, an eccentric Norwegian explorer and expert on obscure flora, a persona I have had occasion to adopt in the past. It will allow me to move through the reception with a degree of anonymity. And I? You, my dear Watson, will be yourself, a solid, dependable British doctor. Your honest face will be a beacon of reassurance to our client. You will stick to the Count like a shadow. Engage him in conversation, remain by his side at all times. Your task is to be a human shield. Under no circumstances are you to let him accept a drink or a morsel of food from anyone but a liveried embassy servant whom you have personally observed taking it from the main buffet." The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. At last, as darkness fell, we hailed a hansom and set off for the German embassy in Carlton House Terrace. It was a magnificent building, ablaze with light, with a constant stream of carriages depositing the great and the good of London society at its grand entrance. As we ascended the marble staircase, I felt a knot of tension tighten in my stomach. The scene before us was one of dazzling splendour. The vast ballroom was a kaleidoscope of colour and movement, with ladies in glittering gowns and gentlemen in immaculate evening dress, their chests adorned with orders and decorations. A string orchestra was playing a waltz, and the air was filled with the murmur of conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. It was a world away from the fog-bound streets and the squalid dens of Soho, and yet I knew that somewhere in this glittering assembly a deadly predator was patiently stalking his prey. We soon located the Count. He was standing near a marble pillar, looking pale and strained, but maintaining an air of aristocratic composure. He was in conversation with the German ambassador, a portly and pompous-looking individual. The Count's eyes met mine with a look of profound relief and gratitude. Following Holmes's instructions, I made my way to his side and engaged him in a conversation about the latest developments in tropical medicine, a subject upon which I was able to discourse with some authority. Holmes, in his guise as Dr. Sigerson, drifted through the crowd, his pince-nez perched on his nose, occasionally peering at the floral decorations with an air of professional interest. For more than an hour, the reception proceeded without incident. I remained glued to the Count's side, deflecting well-meaning offers of drinks and canapés with a firm but polite hand. My nerves were stretched to breaking point. Every waiter who approached, every guest who engaged the Count in conversation seemed, to my overwrought imagination, to be the deadly Klopman in disguise. Then I saw Holmes signal to me from across the room. It was a subtle gesture, a mere flick of the eyes towards the grand French windows that led out onto a stone terrace. I made an excuse to the Count and threaded my way through the crowd to my friend's side. "What is it, Holmes?" I whispered. "The time is at hand," he replied, his voice calm and steady, though his eyes were burning with a fierce intensity. "Mycroft's men are in position. They have reported a disturbance in Soho. A fire has broken out in a building adjacent to the International Hotel. It is a diversion, of course, arranged by Gregson at my request. It will draw the attention of the rank and file, but Klopman will not be fooled. He will know that the net is closing. If he is to act, it must be now." As he spoke, the orchestra struck up a new waltz. At the same moment, the German ambassador bustled towards us, his face beaming. "Ah, Count," he boomed, clapping our client on the shoulder. "You must do me the honour of taking a glass of my very special Tokay, a private stock reserved for my most honoured guests. I have had a bottle brought up especially for you." He gestured towards a small side table, where a single dust-covered bottle and 2 delicate glasses stood waiting. A footman in the embassy livery stood ready to pour. A cold dread seized me. This was it, the moment of crisis. The unseen hand strikes. My heart hammered against my ribs. The ambassador's offer, so jovial and innocuous on the surface, seemed to my heightened senses to be the very embodiment of the trap we had feared. The private stock, the bottle brought up especially for the Count. It was the perfect opportunity for an assassin to introduce his deadly poison. I glanced at Holmes. His face, in the guise of the bumbling Dr. Sigerson, was a mask of bland academic curiosity, but I saw his eyes dart towards the footman who stood by the table, and then to the bottle of Tokay. He gave me the slightest, almost imperceptible shake of the head. It was not time to intervene. Not yet. Following my instructions to the letter, I stepped forward. "A magnificent gesture, Your Excellency," I said, my voice sounding a trifle too loud in my own ears. "But I fear the Count's health is not what it should be. His physician has placed him on a most strict regimen. No alcohol, I am afraid." The ambassador's face fell. "No alcohol? My dear Count, what a tragedy! And this is the finest imperial Tokay from the Emperor's own cellars." The Count, who had been briefed by Holmes's note, played his part to perfection. He sighed with theatrical regret. "Alas, it is true, Your Excellency. Dr. Watson is a tyrant in matters of health. I dare not disobey him." The ambassador, though disappointed, was forced to accept the situation. He turned to engage a passing duchess in conversation, and the moment of immediate danger seemed to have passed. I drew a breath of relief, but a glance at Holmes told me that the crisis was far from over. His eyes were still fixed on the side table, his whole being radiating an aura of supreme, watchful tension. It was then that a most curious incident occurred. A young man, an attaché from the French embassy by his insignia, stumbled as he passed the table. In his clumsiness, he jostled the footman's arm, causing him to slosh a few drops of the precious Tokay from the bottle onto the pristine white tablecloth. The young Frenchman was profusely apologetic, dabbing at the stain with his napkin amidst a flurry of embarrassed pardons before hurrying on his way. The footman, with a discreet sigh, used a silver tray to cover the small dark stain. The incident was so trivial, so commonplace in a crowded room, that it was over in a moment. Yet I saw Holmes's eyes narrow, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. He had seen something that had escaped my notice. He began to move, not towards the Count, but in a slow, meandering path around the periphery of the room, his gaze constantly sweeping the assembled guests. He seemed to be looking for someone, his eyes passing over faces, pausing and moving on. What happened next occurred with a bewildering speed that left me, and I suspect everyone else in the room, utterly stunned. The orchestra had just concluded a waltz, and in the momentary lull a high, clear voice called out from the centre of the room. "Your Excellency, Count, a toast!" All eyes turned towards the speaker. It was the young French attaché who had stumbled a few moments earlier. He now stood with a glass of champagne held aloft, a charming boyish smile on his handsome face. "A toast," he repeated, his voice ringing with sincerity, "to the great work of the Count von und zu Grafenstein, to the new era of friendship and peace between our great nations." It was a sentiment with which no one could possibly disagree. A murmur of approval ran through the room, and guests reached for their own glasses. The German ambassador beamed with pleasure. The Count, as the subject of the toast, inclined his head with a gracious smile. "To peace," echoed the ambassador, raising his own glass. "To peace," came the chorus from all corners of the ballroom. The young Frenchman drank, his eyes twinkling over the rim of his glass as he looked directly at the Count. And then, in an instant, the charming smile was wiped from his face. A look of profound shock, of utter, uncomprehending agony, replaced it. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the polished floor. He clutched at his throat, his mouth opening in a silent scream. A terrible, convulsive shudder ran through his body. He took 2 staggering steps, his eyes wide with a horror that was dreadful to behold, and then crashed face down amongst the glittering throng, as lifeless as a stone. For a moment there was a stunned, disbelieving silence. It was broken by a woman's terrified scream. Pandemonium erupted. Guests recoiled in horror, ladies swooned, and gentlemen shouted in confusion and alarm. But in that instant of chaos, I saw 2 things with a dreadful clarity. I saw Sherlock Holmes, no longer the shuffling academic, but a figure of pure, dynamic energy, launch himself across the room, not towards the fallen man, but towards another figure entirely. The discreet, liveried footman who had stood by the table of Tokay. And I saw the footman's reaction. As the attaché fell, the footman's impassive mask had momentarily dropped, and in its place was a flash of the most diabolical, unadulterated fury I have ever seen on a human face. It was the look of a master craftsman whose perfect and intricate machine has inexplicably failed him at the very moment of its intended triumph. He had turned to flee, but he was too late. Holmes was upon him, his iron grip closing on the man's arm. "It is no use, Klopman," said Holmes, his voice quiet but carrying like a whip-crack in the sudden hush that had fallen near them. "The game is up." The man I had known as a footman was transformed. He straightened up, and in his eyes blazed a fire of pure hatred. He was no common servant. He was a man of power and intellect, a leader accustomed to command. He said nothing but spat on the floor at Holmes's feet. At that moment, several burly men in plain clothes, whom I recognized as Gregson's detectives, converged on the scene and took charge of the prisoner. Inspector Gregson himself appeared at Holmes's side. "A near thing, Mr. Holmes," he said, wiping his brow. "A very near thing." "Nearer than you know, Inspector," replied Holmes grimly. He knelt beside the body of the unfortunate French attaché, a look of profound pity on his face. He gently prized open the dead man's fingers. In his palm lay a tiny, almost invisible splinter of glass. "What is it?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "Look, Watson," he said, pointing to the tablecloth on the side table where the Tokay had been spilled. The small stain had spread, and where the wine had touched the silver tray that covered it, the polished surface was now horribly tarnished and corroded, as if by a powerful acid. "Good heavens," I breathed, "the wine was poisoned." "Not just poisoned," said Holmes, his voice filled with a strange mixture of horror and professional admiration. "It was armed with one of the most diabolical substances known to science, a fulminate of mercury derivative dissolved in a non-reactive solution, harmless on its own. But when brought into contact with the specific tannic acids present in Tokay wine, it becomes instantly and terrifyingly volatile. The wine was not the poison, Watson. It was the catalyst. Klopman intended to offer the Count a glass. The moment the wine was poured from the bottle, the chemical reaction would have begun. The glass itself would have become a miniature bomb, timed to explode with lethal force within seconds of being filled. My blood ran cold. But the attaché? Why did he die? A tragic accident. Klopman, as the footman, would have prepared the glass with the fulminate compound, likely painting a thin, invisible layer on the inside. His plan was foiled when you refused the drink on the Count's behalf. But he is a man of infinite resource. He saw his opportunity when the young Frenchman stumbled and spilled a few drops of the wine. Those drops fell upon the prepared glass that was sitting on the footman's tray. The attaché, in his apology, must have picked up the glass to move it, getting a minuscule, invisible splinter of the now activated glass in his finger. He then proceeded to give his toast, unaware that he held a tiny poisoned sliver of his own death warrant in his hand. The poison is incredibly fast-acting. He was dead before he hit the floor. I stared, dumbfounded, at the scene of carnage and chaos, and then at the face of my friend. He had not merely saved the Count's life, he had unravelled a plot of such fiendish ingenuity that it bordered on the supernatural. He had looked into the brilliant twisted mind of the man called Klopman and had anticipated his every move. The Count stood nearby, his face as white as a sheet, staring at the body of the young Frenchman. He knew that he was looking at his own intended fate. He walked over to Holmes, his composure entirely gone, his hands trembling. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you my life." "You owe your life, Count," replied Holmes quietly, "to the unfortunate clumsiness of a well-meaning young man. Let us hope that the peace he toasted with his dying breath is a worthy monument to his sacrifice." The final deduction. The journey back to Baker Street in the early hours of the morning was a silent one. The terrible and dramatic events of the evening had left me in a state of shock, and even Holmes seemed more subdued and weary than I had ever known him. The capture of Klopman had been a triumph, but it had been bought at the cost of a human life, and the shadow of the unfortunate young Frenchman hung heavy in the air. It was not until we were seated on either side of a crackling fire in our familiar sitting room, a glass of brandy in my hand, and Holmes drawing thoughtfully on his long-cherished briar pipe, that the spell of silence was broken. "You see, Watson," he began, gazing into the flames, "the true artistry of the master criminal lies not in the brute force of his actions, but in the subtlety and elegance of his conception. By that standard, Klopman was an artist, albeit a monstrous one. His plan was a masterpiece of chemical devilry." "But how, Holmes? How could you possibly have known? The poisoned glass, the chemical reaction, it is beyond belief." "It was a chain of reasoning, my dear Watson, with each link leading logically to the next. The first and most crucial step was to understand the mind of our adversary. Mycroft's information was invaluable. I knew I was dealing with a man of science, a brilliant chemist, and a fanatic with a flair for the dramatic. Such a man would not resort to a simple knife or bullet. He would seek a method that was both intellectually satisfying and terrifyingly effective. He sent the Count the Black Lotus. That was a clue. It showed me his proficiency in toxicology, but I suspected it was a feint. Poison in a crowded room is always a risky proposition. The victim might not accept the drink. The glass might be switched. Klopman is too meticulous a planner for that. I began to consider other possibilities. What if the delivery system itself was the weapon? The glass? Precisely. I spent the day before the reception in my laboratory, studying the more obscure corners of organic chemistry. I was searching for a compound, a substance that could be stable in one form, but could be rendered unstable and dangerous by a common catalyst. The world of fulminates is a fascinating one, Watson. It is a science of controlled explosions. It occurred to me that a man of Klopman's genius might have found a way to weaponize it on a miniature scale. But how did you know it was the Tokay? That was the key. Why the elaborate charade of the private stock? Why a specific bottle, brought up especially for the Count? It was not merely for show. It was a necessary part of the mechanism. The reaction required a specific catalyst. Klopman must have known the Count's fondness for Tokay, a fact easily ascertained by a spy within the hotel staff. He constructed his entire plan around that single predictable piece of human behavior. And the French attaché Holmes? I asked, the tragic image of the young man still vivid in my mind. His role was the one element of pure chance in the entire affair, the unforeseen accident that brought the whole edifice crashing down. It was when he stumbled that I knew with absolute certainty what was afoot. You saw a clumsy young man. I saw something quite different. I was watching the footman, Klopman, with the utmost concentration. When the attaché stumbled, it was not the footman he jostled, but the table. The Frenchman never touched him. Yet the footman reacted, a tiny, almost imperceptible flinch, and he deliberately sloshed the wine himself. It was a brilliant piece of improvisation. He created a minor, believable accident to achieve his true purpose, which was to get a sample of the wine onto the prepared glass without arousing suspicion. He could then claim the glass was spoiled and remove it from play, substituting another for the Count. But in that brief moment I saw him dip the very tip of his finger into the spilled wine and then brush it against the inside of the champagne glass that the attaché later picked up. A tiny, untraceable transfer. He was a creature of contingencies. If Plan A failed, he had already set Plan B in motion, a more conventional poisoning. But the young man, in his enthusiasm, acted too quickly. He toasted the Count, drank the champagne that Klopman had tainted with the secondary poison, and died, exposing the entire conspiracy. I shook my head in amazement. "It is incredible! You saw all that in a split second?" In moments of extreme pressure, Watson, the senses are heightened. The eye sees what it is trained to see. My entire investigation had been a process of training my mind to anticipate the methods of this one particular man. When the moment came, I was ready. He fell silent for a moment, puffing clouds of blue smoke into the air. "There is a larger lesson here, Watson," he continued, his tone becoming more philosophical. "We sit here in our comfortable little island, and we imagine ourselves to be safe, insulated from the violent passions that rack the continent. But we are not. London is the heart of the world, and all the arteries of humanity, the good and the bad, lead to it. Tonight, in that glittering ballroom, we witnessed a clash between two great forces. The force of order and diplomacy, represented by the Count and his treaty, and the force of chaos and destruction, embodied by the brilliant, twisted mind of Klopman. We, my friend, were merely the instruments that allowed the former to prevail. The case of the Count von und zu Grafenstein was concluded. Klopman, revealed to be the leader of a vast and well-funded network of saboteurs, was tried in secret and, I believe, met his end on a scaffold within the grim walls of the Tower of London, a fate befitting a traitor to all nations. The naval treaty was signed, and for a time a fragile peace was secured between Britain and Germany. The Count returned to his homeland, a man who had looked into the abyss and survived. For Sherlock Holmes, it was but one more case among hundreds, another set of neatly docketed notes to be filed away in his voluminous records. But for me, it remains a stark and vivid reminder of the time when we stood in the path of a storm that threatened to engulf the civilized world, and of the extraordinary intellect and courage of the one man who was able to turn it aside. The unseen hand of the Nihilist had been met and defeated by the unerring eye and the swift, decisive action of my friend, the master of the science of deduction.